some of you don't know who I am. I'm Melissa Moore. I'm on staff here. I'm a church administrator. And I have the pleasure of interviewing Kait before she speaks today. And it was one of those things where I kind of approached Lewis the wrong way when I went in and said, I should have said, what are the questions for the interview? Instead, I was like, do you have the questions for the interview? And he was like, well, no, you can do them. And I was like, great. So that was fun because I did very different questions than Lewis did. And then Kait was like, thanks a lot. There's a lot of questions. But you can give short answers. Yes. So we'll get started. I think Melissa's not asking these questions. So, is this on? Am I on? Okay, cool. I hate talking into the microphone and I always try to use that. I'm going to use my big voice, but they told me I had to. So I'd like you to introduce yourself and your family.
So my name is Kait Saffold and my husband is Sean Saffold. I'm sure you've seen him up here and around. And then we have a very vibrant 5-year-old who's usually running around in pink. Her name is Cozy. And then the younger guy in the wheelchair is mine also. His name is Boaz and he's 3.
And we are also blessed to have your father here
yes,
as well. So
right. I guess he's related to me as well.
Yeah.
Yes, my dad is in the back.
Yeah.
My in-laws are here, yes. I made sure not to tell anyone I'm speaking, but of course Sean told my in-laws and so that's right here.
When I was preaching, somebody told my entire family, and my uncle in California texted me at 6 o'clock in the morning, in which I was sound asleep, and he was like, I'm praying for you, and I was like, now I'm really nervous. Can you share 5 little known facts about you?
Yes, this was really hard. My biggest claim to fame when I was young was that I got $100 for not drinking soda for a year. So I was like 9 or 10.
That's a good one.
Yeah, I grew up homeschooled. Thanks to living in Asia, I'm really good at riding side saddle on a motorbike. I'm really good at balancing on a motorbike side saddle. I've recently really gotten into cake decorating and I really enjoy it. And for those of you who are who know what the Enneagram is, it's like a personality thing. I'm an Enneagram 4, which means that I really enjoy being unique and creative. And I'm a very emotional person. So there you are.
You and Nathan are both 4s.
Yeah.
So, yeah, because I'm a 1. So, okay. How did you and Sean meet?
So we actually met overseas. I mainly grew up in Florida and he mainly grew up here. So the best way to meet, as Sean always likes to say, is we met in the middle in Asia instead of meeting in the middle of America. Sorry. Anyway, yeah, so we were both doing missions, but in different countries at the time. He was in Myanmar, Burma for about 8-10 years, and I was doing a 1-year stint in India teaching a couple of missionary kids, and they went on furlough for a few months. So I got relocated to Thailand teaching English as a second language, and Sean got really sick with dengue fever, and so came to Thailand to rest up with some friends who were my team leaders. And that's how we met. About a week or so in, we started talking about getting to know each other better and became intentional friends. And 2 weeks later, we were dating. And 6 months later, we got engaged. And a year after that, we were married. So.
I met Sean. He's a friend of my brother's. So I met Sean well before that, and he was convinced he was never going to get married.
Yes.
So pictures from that time in their life, I love, because Sean looks so excited.
He looks like he won the lottery.
Yeah, and you guys both look like babies, so it makes me feel really old.
I'm not 10 years now. Yep.
So how would you go about saying you came to be a Jesus follower?
Yeah, this was a really good question for me to ponder back on. I was raised in the church and come from a Christian family, so it's just always been around. I kind of made like a pivotal decision about when I was 5, which is kind of interesting. It's around my daughter's age, and I was like, I'm going to follow Jesus. And as much as I understood, that was, and so For me, there's never been a huge crisis of faith. It's just been a gradual learning and growing. And, it still looks very different than it did 10 years ago. And so it's always interesting just to see it growing and, doing different things in different seasons of life. But yeah, thankfully, I'm really blessed that Jesus has always been a part of my life in one form or another.
Well, you shared that you were on the mission field. So I guess my next question leads right into what led you to have a passion for missions and, led you to that space in your life?
Yeah. I think, again, it was just being in an environment where that was talked a lot about. I really remember when, I think it was on my 10th birthday, I was doing like a little kids devotional and it was talking about missions. And it was the first time I really felt the Holy Spirit speaking to me. And he was like, I want you to be a missionary when you grow up. And so obviously that looks different now, but I still feel like God has laid on my heart to be that. And again, what that looks like can be very different than what I initially thought going in. But again, growing up, that was something that always really interested me, and I felt like I kind of had a calling on my life.
So what is one piece of advice or wisdom that you'd like to share with all of us?
I think the biggest thing I've learned in my journey with Christ is that, especially growing up in the church, it's that fine line between religion of a relationship, and especially being kind of a rule follower, perfectionist, the oldest in my family, I can get kind of lost in that sometimes. And so the more I learn and grow, the more I realize that it's less about the rules and more about just having a relationship with Jesus and walking with him and learning with him and being close to him. It's not, reading your Bible is great, but also if you don't read it one day, it's not going to smite you. That was big news for me.
So how can we as the church and your community help support you and encourage you and Sean and your family?
We were talking about this morning, and we feel like you guys are already doing such a phenomenal job for us. When we first came here, we had been asked to leave another church because Boaz at the time was really struggling breathing, and his breathing was loud. So the pastor said he felt like he couldn't compete with it. And so at that point, we were feeling really lost and wasn't sure if someone would take us. And then you guys, always hard for me not to get emotional with the story, but you guys have just really showed me what a family of Christ can be like, and that you guys just allow our kids to be kids, like Boaz to be a complete terror, and Loretta always being so kind and letting Boaz clink away on the piano with her, or being back there in AV, or just allowing our kids to be kids and to really feel a part of church as well. But even with like the kids sermon we had a while back, really trying to get them in, not just as like a display thing, but really allowing them to be a part, I think is going to be so integral to their faith as well and to their walk with Christ. And so, yeah, we're just really grateful that especially this church just really takes us as we are. I think that's the biggest thing I've learned from you guys.
Well, we love having you here, and I'm excited. Kate's going to share some more with us today. The other thing too is she's also on our church's leadership board and is kind of our missions coordinator. So she is, if you ever have questions about like our mission support, Kate or myself, Kate, you can talk to me. But yes, because she has a heart for it and she has the experience. She's a great person to ask questions and find out more information. So with that, you can use that, or you can stand at the podium. Whatever you
Here to center.
All right, yes, so a couple weeks ago, Pastor Lewis was talking about us all being priests and priestesses, and he was having us repeat things like, everyone should preach and everyone should, be a part of the church, and we're all supposed to repeat that. And the next day he calls me and it's like, I saw you repeating and saying amen about speaking, so we should speak in 2 weeks. And I was like, so word to the wise, he's trying to entrap us with repeating things, so be very careful what you repeat. I don't like being up here, but here I am. So I would just kind of love, since we to reread the passage again, just so it's in our minds. And thank you, Warren, for sharing your thoughts on the passage as well. So it's Luke 13:31-35. At that time, some Pharisees said to him, "Get away from here if you want to live. Herod Antipas wants to kill you." Jesus replied, "Go tell that fox that I will keep on casting out demons and healing people today and tomorrow. And the third day I will accomplish my purpose. Yes, today, tomorrow, and the next day I must proceed on my way. For what would it do for a prophet of God to be killed except in Jerusalem? O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, the city that kills the prophets and stones God's messengers. How often I have wanted to gather your children together as a hen protects her chicks beneath her wings, but you wouldn't let me. And now, look, your house is abandoned, and you will never see me again until you say, blessings on the Lord who comes, blessings on the one who comes in the name of the Lord." So with this verse, for me, as I was thinking about it, Louis and I were talking, and he was saying that I should share stuff on Myanmar, and I'm going to in a minute, the same as like what's going on in Ukraine, and there's a lot of radical things happening there, and it can feel really overwhelming here, that it's not, that we don't often know what to do, that we can feel really helpless. But also just, I guess this picture is going to be up here, I want to go ahead and mention, so I saw this on Facebook. I guess Facebook is good for something, because I saw this on Facebook this week. And I'm pretty sure you could look at this picture and find one person at least that you do not agree with, or that you wouldn't normally want to go up and be friends with, that wouldn't be natural to you. And yet every single one of these people, God is washing their feet, Jesus is washing their feet, or this version of Jesus, obviously. And so in that way, it just really made me think that this is an excellent vision of what God wants us to do, this vision of radical discipleship. So if I get boring, you can look at the picture and think about that. Yeah, so I just wanted to share a brief overview of what's kind of been happening in Myanmar this last year. So for those of you who don't know, really quick, Sean and I were missionaries together in Myanmar for about 4 years, almost five. And Sean was there a total of 13 years. So Myanmar is very deep on our hearts. It used to be called Burma, for those of you who don't know, and it's in that Thailand kind of area, so Southeast Asia. And they've been plagued by a lot of political upheaval for a while now. They are part of a military dictatorship, which just means that the military is in charge, really has a handle on what can be said, what cannot be said, what can be done, what cannot be done. And so there's not a lot of freedom. And so that has been happening for a really long time, but because of sanctions and outward pressure, they were starting to let up on some of these. And so they finally had a free and fair election. And I'm not sure what they were thinking the outcome was going to be, but of course the Free Party was the one that got elected by a landslide, and so the military was not happy about that. So February 2nd of 2021, they launched a coup and arrested all of the leaders that were about to become in power. They've cut off internet. They've been very brutal as far as, oh, are we doing children's church today?
Oh, yeah, I didn't.
I guess if there's children's church, go to children's church.
I'm sorry, I just thought too. Sorry.
Yeah, so just with the military, they started being really violent as far as arresting people. And so this is why I'm not like more dressed up today. I'm wearing my Fight Like a Woman shirt. They have had to be really creative as far as how to protect themselves. They really tried to band together and fight back against the military this time, because they're like, we finally want to have freedom. We've had a tiny taste of what democracy could be like, what freedom of speech could be like, and we don't want to go back to what it was like 50 years ago, it was getting better, we were almost there, and now you're taking us back into the dark ages, and they don't want that taken away. So in the very beginning, they were doing even the simple things as at nighttime, they were banging on pots and pans as a way to protest, because they weren't allowed to go out at night, so they would just make a lot of noise in their streets to like be like, we are protesting against this. And for this shirt and vision, so they wear, the women wear like long traditional skirts called tenangs. And there's not a lot of washing and drying machines, so you can see even in the city, a lot of people airing out their laundry. And apparently there's an old wives' tale that men should not ever walk under women's skirts because they will lose some of their manly powers. And so for when the military was trying to come into neighborhoods and harass and hurt and murder people, the women specifically hung their laundry across the street to deter people from coming back. So, so just coming up with super creative ways like that to protest and fight back. But it's still been really bad, and there hasn't been a lot of media coverage or help as well for them. I know a lot of, even when I tried to reach out to some of our Myanmar friends, they can't really reply back because Facebook isn't safe. They're monitoring like social media. A lot of people have been arrested, like thousands of people, and it's not prisons like ours. It's very bad prisons. And so I know that a lot of my friends have to be careful, and most of my other missionary friends have had to evacuate, and it was under pretty chaotic, traumatic conditions of the military being in their neighborhoods, sorting people out, and just was no longer safe. A lot of them have young children, and so they're either back here in America or they're in neighboring Thailand trying to do their best to get help to the people of Myanmar and just trying to wait till they can come back. I have one friend who's married to a local, and so he has stayed, and the little that we've heard from him is that it's just really bad. The economy is totally tanked. You have to stand in line for hours at an ATM just to get like $100, which does not go very far right now. And even some days you can stand there for hours from the break of dawn, and then it's all gone out of the ATM. So I recently sent him like, if you could talk, and he was like, I'm sorry for the silence. Our line is so weak, always offline. Not sure if this message will even reach you. I probably can't share too openly, and because of our line, I don't know if these messages will even get through. But one thing I would want to share is prayer is our most powerful resource. Don't forget us in our situation. Please keep praying. And I think that is the fear of a lot of the Myanmar people, is just the lack of the coverage, the lack of help. And they just feel so abandoned and lost. And it's hard for us that have heart ties to Myanmar to watch there be no coverage on it. And I've been just as devastated by Ukraine, but it's also been hard to not see any coverage on Myanmar as well. So I have another friend who's also a missionary there now, living in Thailand, and he very nicely sent me kind of a rundown of different sections of Myanmar that have really deteriorated, and so I'm going to read that to you guys really quick. So as far as the economics, he says continued rise in cost of good has severely affected the normal populations. Many others have lost jobs, and the economy is slowing, so opportunities are lessening. Because of this, many people are having to make tough financial decisions to survive in the short term, but those choices will be devastating in the long run. For example, taking mortgages out on land and selling property or other assists at very low prices. This is called stomach ache sales, meaning the people are hungry, so they are willing to sell cheap just to survive. Others take loans from loan sharks, and the interest is outrageous. As for education, the school system has been in shambles since the coup. Because of COVID and the coup, most children have missed 2 years of schooling. If people can afford it, they can send their kids to supplemental tutoring classes, but there is no clear path forward in regards to education. A similar situation happened in 1988, and most of these students never received high school diplomas, which negatively impacted their job opportunities for the rest of their lives. As for mental health, the consensus from friends is that people are simply not happy. Most of the population is struggling with worries, and joy is lacking, This has negative effects on people physically, spiritually, and mentally. As for the military, who's in charge of everything, many in the rank and file of the military do not have access to outside information. Those that are basically enslaved in the military and being fed propaganda for the military dictatorships ends. And are slaves to a cause they might not even agree with. Because the military provides families with housing as well as income, it is more than just a simple choice to leave. You will lose everything. Many families within the military see their only way of surviving by keeping quiet and following the status quo. At least then they will get their monthly salary for food and have a roof over their heads. As for unity, the coup is creating greater unity among the people of Myanmar. Specifically, there has been a noticeable change amongst the majority Buddhist population towards the Rohingya Muslim. And there's been a lot of prejudice and even genocide against the Muslim people for many years. Many are seeing that their previous views on the Rohingya were lies told to them by the military to keep them all divided. They have kind of these tribal kind of feelings, and so they have a lot of like cliques basically, which are different tribes, and so there's a lot of racism and animosity there. But many are seeing that their previous views of the Rohingya were lies told to them by the military. This is opening doors and hearts for reconciliation among various groups across Myanmar. Pray that the church in Myanmar would take this unique time to be ministers of reconciliations. In the midst of the Russia-Ukraine conflict, please continue to remember Myanmar in your prayers as well. Though the people might look different than us, they are struggling for their own rights and freedoms. They did not choose these sufferings for themselves. This is the time for the Church Universal to stand up with the people and show them the love of Christ through prayer, word, and deed. Those are words from my missionary friends. So it's really heavy, obviously. It's just another heavy thing that we feel like we have to carry, right? Like a lot of the Ukraine conflict that I know a lot of you are following. And it's been even hard for me to follow. And I know that's hard for probably some of you as well. It can feel really heavy to hear about all these problems and to feel so helpless, like we can't even do much. I've had to really regulate how much I even follow certain news sources. Sean was telling me a story about from Ukraine, and it was just so horrific. I burst into tears, and I didn't even, I wasn't even prepared to do that. And I was just really surprised by the reaction, and it's so heavy. It's really horrific to hear about all these things happening. And so with this talking about martyrdom and radical discipleship in these Luke verses, I often get overwhelmed and discouraged by there's so much going on, and it feels like we can't do anything. How are we supposed to live out this radical discipleship, especially in light of current events and world events? It can just feel really heavy. So how can we help? And the big thing that going back, which my friend's emails already mentioned, is the biggest one, honestly, is prayer. And for me, I always end up feeling like it's kind of a cop-out since I grew up in church. It's like, if anyone has anything wrong with their day, it's like, oh, I'll pray for you. And sometimes, at least for me, I forget to pray. It's just something I say. So it's like, okay, prayer, whatever. But at the same time, it is one of the most powerful tools that we as Christians have. If we remember the parable story of the widow who nagged the judge till he was finally like, all right, how much more is our Father, friend, God, who's willing to reach out to us if we are begging him to help in these things. The more I read the Psalms and hear their honest cries for help, their prayers of even lamenting. This last year, Sean and I were really blessed by a pastor friend of ours that visited us in the heat of this really difficult conflict, and he was telling us about lamenting prayers, and I had never fully been a part of at least the way he did it, but it was just being super honest, especially in the beginning of the prayer with your feelings about, this is awful, this is terrible, we don't understand this, we're angry. And honestly, there again, growing up as a church kid, it almost felt kind of counterintuitive, because you're always supposed to be like, God, we know that you have this in hand and all this. And it was just being so honest with your feelings in the beginning. And it really felt like God was there and he was listening, because God can take it. God can take our heavy feelings, our difficult feelings. He already knows how we're feeling anyway. And so, and then at the end, when we got it all out, and it was like, we know you can turn this around and we're asking you to do it. And so it went on for like 30 minutes when he was doing the lamenting. So just remember that you don't always have to, it doesn't always have to be requests. It doesn't always have to be praises. It can be lamenting, and he'll be there with you. And lamenting, as I'm looking at these pictures, I'm seeing a lot of these people have their heads bowed and they're sad, and God is still there washing their feet. So we can be honest in how we're feeling and really pray for these things. And that is probably one of the biggest ways that we can help globally right now, with so many things going on. Another one is listening. I've been surprised to, not just with social media, that you can hear, people's stories that way, but also we have people in our town that are connected to this stuff. We know a guy that's from Burma who I'm sure he would love for someone to be like, how are you doing with this? How are you feeling? Sean recently mowed a family's lawn who they're from Ukraine, and he listened while they told him how they're feeling about their family being, if their family's going to be okay, if they're ever going to see them, that they were even looking at tickets to go be with their family because they were so worried about them, and their family was like, no, don't do that. I think we even have a family, Sean, or again, someone who works with Sean who comes from Russia. So there are people even in our town, if we open our eyes and look around, that are even involved in these different global conflicts. So if we even stop and ask questions and try to listen to them, as well as, and if you don't know anyone, there's always social media, lots of people willing to give their opinions on there. If you're wanting to listen and to be in that space and hold space for those people, because I know when I'm going through a hard time, it helps me to have people process with me and to really listen through that. Obviously, another one, if you have spare change rolling around, is money, but there's creative ways to give it other than just to send it to like an organization. You can get it more directly to people or really listen to people who are on the ground. Another way to listen is the ways that they need money, not just to give certain ways. I've been really impressed. I've seen this thing going around where for Ukraine, people were booking Airbnbs in Ukraine, not to go there, but to give money to people. And so there can be really creative ways to reach out with our money and any other materials God has given us as well. In the beginning of all this happening with Myanmar, there were ways to contact Congress and sign petitions. So there's way in the political atmosphere as well that we can get out there and try to, if you're calling Congress, writing letters, even just quickly signing an online petition. It can be a way that, because I know for me, often at least on the political side, I can feel, again, really helpless, like no one's going to hear me, my vote or the way that I want things to go isn't going to turn around. But if we all band together and try to use our voices, then we can make enough noise to make them listen sometimes. And again, going back to this picture, just look for radical ways at home. We can't always do something big for people across the water other than praying for them and the ways I listed. But even simple things, it starts here, right? We have so much homeless in Swim alone. I feel like it keeps growing. I can't feel like I keep seeing them. Yeah. Just going out and asking them, what do they need? I've started doing that recently, every once in a while when the Spirit prompts. And I was always afraid to ask because I thought it would be something crazy I couldn't do. And so far it's been really small things, like give a ride or give me some coins to wash my dirty blankets because I'm camping out in the woods, or a pint of ice cream or a sandwich, like really easy doable stuff that I can do. And so there are ways that we can reach out even here. And it might, and the great thing about the body too is God puts different callings on our hearts. So for you, you might not see the homeless population. You might see something else in our community or in the world that is like, this needs to happen. And if we bring that to God and ask him how we specifically can do that, he can reach out and we can reach out and try to be like this picture. Yeah. So that's really all I had today. Just wanted to share and thank you guys for listening. about Myanmar and hearing about the cause that God has put it on my heart and my family's heart, and yeah, just being willing to listen and to just want to try to do that. So I think that's all I had.
Were you doing communion?
Yes. That's all my communion.
I was like, wait, I'm not prepared.
Even though I want to, I won't run off the stage. So I was thinking about this too, as we're going into, as we're in Lent, we're going into the Easter season. This was a pretty radical way that Jesus showed his love for us, was by dying on the cross. And I really love that we have Lent as a time, not even, I think it's great when people give stuff up. I don't always feel led to do that, but just trying to be really intentional and thinking about this time. Like there's different TV shows you can watch if you want to really get it, or different songs. I've been listening to this album by Poor Bishop Hooper, and it's called Golgotha, and it's just the entire album. It's just each step on the journey, and it's been really interesting to listen and to think on. So I've been really grateful for this Lent time to be able to think on that. But yeah, as we take communion today, just be really thinking about how, again, with the foot washing picture, that Jesus is showing his radical love for us and how we can put that up together. So Jesus took the bread and he gave it to his disciples and he broke it. And he said, "Take, eat, this is my body, which is given for you." He also took the cup, and he drank, gave it to his disciples, and he said, "This is my blood poured out for you. Drink this in remembrance of me." Thank you guys for letting me share today, and those of you that were excited to have me share, and yeah, I appreciate it. And really am thankful for this body of believers.
Thank you.
So, thank you.